Hi everyone, I'm Alison Gill. I'm a design researcher in the School of Humanities and Communication Arts at Western Sydney. I'm delighted to introduce Nina today to you, Nina Gbor, in various places. I, this event is, the keynote, particularly as part of this event, is supported by the Global Challenge program at Western Sydney University, and I'm one of the co-leads of a challenge called Creating Livable Environments. And Nina's joined us today to help us think through the impact of clothing and fashion as both artifact and a system that impacts us significantly. Yeah, and think about that as create plans and ideas to think about how we might create more livable and sustainable futures through our relationships with clothing and fashion. We're all dressed, as you see. They're such a fundamental part of our daily lives, often taken for granted, but very important to the future of our communities and also the planet, as you'll hear Nina speak about. So the event is also this wonderful partnership with the Library Thought Leadership Series, the Festival of Action at Western Sydney University, led by Jenna and team, and also the Institute for Culture and Society and the Urban Futures program. So thanks to everyone for making this keynote happen. So Nina works with media, councils, organisations, schools and community groups to develop strategies for holistic systems change towards a more circular and sustainable future. Nina founded the sustainable fashion education platform EcoStyles, along with two platforms called Swap in the City Australia and Clothes Swap and Style, that teach and empower communities to reduce textile waste to landfill through exchanging clothes. So if you are interested in putting out the flames of fast fashion, you're in the right place, because that's what Nina's here to tell us or speak to us about this. She has some wonderful titles. Like at a clothes swap, it's hard to know which ones to wear them or you'd like to take home or which one to choose. So Nina is a circular economy and sustainability educator, a clothes swap maven and eco-stylist, and also the director of the Circular Economy and Waste program at the Australia Institute. And it's in that capacity, she wrote this fantastic discussion paper called Textile Waste in Australia, Reducing Consumption and Investing in Circularity, which was written as in her role as Director of Waste and Policy Influencer at the Australian Institute. And I really wanted to congratulate her on this paper because it is really bold. From the Academy's perspective, it feels bold. It calls out the fashion industry, policy and regulation in Australia about what the fashion industry is doing. And it responds to, I think, the fatigue that we encounter with numerous strategies and initiatives that don't necessarily get close enough to the problem. So I really congratulate you on that paper, Nina, and I hope we'll hear something about it. It's got a great front page, which I think Nina will show in her slides, and it's really worth reading all 30, 40 pages of it and the data that it draws on. It's fantastic. So it unequivocally questions the rapid production by the global fashion industry, particularly of fast fashion, and the overconsumption of fast fashion brands in Australia. I mean, did you know that we're one of the largest consumers of fast fashion and fashion per capita in Australia after the US? And Gbor and Chollet's paper argues for slowing down global production rates and clothing imports in Australia in conjunction with rethinking how we make, buy, collect, redistribute and share clothing and textiles. So you may have also heard that, we have enough clothes on the planet to last 6 generations already. That's why we are interested in um, exploring alternatives. You might be thinking, where's the fun in not buying any new clothes again? Well, Dina will no doubt convince you there's a lot of fun and alternatives in thinking about Yeah, restyling, exchanging what we already have, sharing, and so on. So I think Nina's really incredible skill is to put really big change, massive change ideas into really accessible terms and remind us that it's about amplifying our existing small practices that many of us are doing already. And from little things, big things grow. And I think maybe I should leave it there and let Nina tell you about, the way in which she's also normalizing swaps as fashion forevers and a lot more. With a background in international development, Nina really brings an important international perspective to shaping approaches to circularity and policy models in Australia. And her report really evaluates, again, strengths and limits of international, what are called voluntary stewardship schemes that brands sign on to and pay a small levy on all the items coming into Australia, imports, but also things manufactured here. And with that money, the system is meant to remodel and transform itself. But possibly it's not enough money for this huge problem that we have. Yeah. So Nina will tell us a little bit more about that, I think. But really, Nina's really interested in collaborating for holistic systems change towards a more circular and sustainable fashion future, which has to happen across all sectors. And responsibility too often falls on individuals to do something. And here we'll think about how we might work together, conversations about these critical collaborations and solidarity that has to occur. Again, thinking about the things that we're wearing every day and the purchases that we make while wearing clothes. So welcome, Nina. Thanks. And there'll be, if we could save questions to the end, Nina will talk for about 35 minutes, and then I'll take questions from the floor and online. We've got some guests online too.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Alison, Stephen, and Jenna. I just want to say how grateful I am that you have me speaking today. There's a lot to cover, and as Alison mentioned, I'm very much into holistic systems change, right? So I'll start by saying, in this era that we have of unprecedented pollution, unprecedented epic waste levels, climate emergencies everywhere, biodiversity loss, breach of planetary boundaries, potential for global financial collapse, and according to some scientists, the potential for the sixth mass extinction is critical that we do everything that we can because we didn't get here overnight, right? Pollution levels that we have right now didn't happen overnight. It happened over a period of time with significant effort. And if we're going to fix it, again, we need significant effort, significant huge reinvestments, and a lot of time and dogged determination and perseverance to make that happen. Now, I know that this is a somber way to begin a talk, to pretty much say, well, the world is going to end. But the reason why I'm bringing up these issues is that, there's a lot of things that need to be done, and we'll cover a lot of them in this talk. But it gives context to why I have such a long laundry list or hostage list of things that we need to do to turn the tide. And from my experience in the circular economy environmental space, and this is not a criticism, but sometimes we tend to linger a bit too long with the baby steps, considering where we actually are in the climate crisis and everything else. And it's great to celebrate small wins and grassroots movements, but we might not have as much time as we think, right? So it's very critical that we look at the broader ecological systems change, right? In addition to the grassroots movements that we do both in our communities and in our individual lives and households. So a little bit about me. So I started off as a 15-year-old. This is not me when I was 15, I was older. But I started off actually when I was a young child. I was about 3 or 4 years old watching vintage films from the 40s and 50s with my mother because we loved them. And I fell in love with, style icons like Audrey Hepburn and Grace Kelly. Now, this was my foray into the world of fashion, love for fashion and style. And I'm saying this because later on in the presentation, I'll talk about how people come into the space, into the environmental space from different perspectives, and they're all valid. But for me, it was through films. So as a teenager, I started eco-styling, which is mixing vintage fashion with contemporary fashion, creating my own looks, styling people. And I still do this. I run workshops. Oh, and I'm going to plug, I'm running a restyling workshop at Randwick Council this Saturday, 10 a.m. So you're all welcome. But this is one of the things I do, eco-styling. I give talks and lectures, guest lectures at universities, councils, organizations, environmental movements, panel discussions about circular economy, education, sustainable fashion, ecological economies. I've been running clothes swaps for about 15 years. This is one that we had in Melbourne, one of the bigger ones. I think we had up to 700 or 800 people that come through the doors that day. So a lot of these things are critical and important. Now, I've been doing this, like I said, since I was 15 years old. Obviously, I'm no longer 15. But what I realized was over the years, the problem was just getting worse, right? So all this effort that myself and a lot of people in the environmental space were doing, but we went from having the founding fathers of fast fashion being the likes of H&M and Zara to ultra fast fashion, right? And they 10x what H&M and Zara were doing, the founders of fast fashion. So I thought to myself, wow, we have between 100 to 150 billion garments being manufactured. We have ultra fast fashion. What's going to come next? Supersonic fast fashion? Instant fast fashion? The speed of sound? So it's absolutely critical that we look at broader systems and policies to slow down overproduction, planned obsolescence, and waste levels that we have now. Now, most of us are across, the impact of fashion on the environment and social injustice. But in case you need a reminder, fashion emits 1.2 billion tons of greenhouse gases a year. It's one of the most polluting industries in the world. One garbage truck full of clothing is sent to landfill or incinerated every second somewhere in the world. Less than 10% of garment workers are paid livable wages, right? We have about 75 million garment workers in the world. Less than 10% are paid a livable wage, and this is why clothes are so cheap. Now, fast fashion has broken our brains, and we think that, oh, if clothing should be far cheaper than what it's actually worth. So someone somewhere, either here in Australia, because yes, we do still manufacture some clothes here in Australia, or somewhere else in the world is losing blood, sweat, and tears so that we can have cheap clothes that we do not value and we use or don't even bother using and throw away. Such is the system. So fashion uses the equivalent of 37 million Olympic swimming pools of fresh water each year, right? So these are just a few of the impacts of fast fashion. Now, realizing all of how things were getting worse, I never really wanted to work in policy. That wasn't, even though I have a background in international development, I just didn't have a desire for it. I thought it was boring. I enjoyed my styling. I enjoyed my clothes swaps. I enjoyed the aesthetics of fashion. I was happy. But I just couldn't ignore the fact that things were just going to get worse if we didn't do something. And I had a wish to actually work in policy, surprise myself. And I was fortunate enough through happenstance to be asked by the Australia Institute to come and do something around waste. So we created the Circular Economy and Waste program to do research and recommend policy to the federal government. Now, the Australia Institute, in case you're not familiar with them, they conduct research that drives public debate and secures policy outcomes that make Australia better. So that's often in politics, public policy, and social policy. So I co-authored the textile waste report that Alison referenced last year, and we addressed some of the issues of fashion industry in Australia, which I'll address later on as well. So today's conference is about reuse and repair for climate justice. And I thought it was important to point out that extending the active use of a garment by 9 extra months can reduce its carbon, waste, and water footprints by 20 to 30% each. Now, this is critical, but, of course, there are other benefits to reusing, as we've talked about earlier. There's the community aspect, there's the sharing, there's the well-being, the feel good when you have, your connection to your garments, all of those things. But some of the other environmental impacts are things like, reducing waste to landfill, less demand on raw materials, less destruction of biodiversity, less destruction of animal and plant habitats, less destruction of ecosystems. Those are also critical impacts of reuse and repair, but also, on the economic side, job creation. You know how in politics everything is about, oh, everything's looked at from a capitalist economic perspective, what's the outcome. So job creation is one of them, right? Because we all do proposals, and, with our various organizations or with local federal governments. Job creation is very important one to say. Financial savings, as we all know, and a more circular and sustainable future, because that's something that we've been aiming for. And again, because today is about reuse and repair, those are very solid circular economy principles. It's not a circular economy conference. However, that's a space I work in. And, circular economy is such a strong buzzword. And the last minister, most of the policies that were created were based on the circular economy. So whether you work in a climate space or any other space, it's something that we can't avoid at the moment because, the EU, as well as Australia and other parts of the world, it's the main focus and the foundation for creating policy at the moment. Now, reuse actions are beneficial. As I mentioned, I've been running close also 15 years, and this is something that you all know. It builds and strengthens community. It's empowering. So over the years, I've seen people who refuse to wear secondhand clothes for economic reasons or whatever, come to a clothes swap because we would rebrand it from something from a clothes swap to a party, right? We'll say, oh, we'd serve wine and refreshments. And say, oh, just come to party, but bring just a few clothes, that you don't want anymore, swap in the background. And these people would come because they can afford to buy luxury brands. So why, in their minds, they thought, why would I need to buy secondhand? And they'd come to these parties and they would find quality clothes and they have such a good time that they would become converts. And I'd watch these same people start to shop in op shops, shop secondhand. I'd watch these same people start to host their own clothes swaps. I'd watch these same people start to join environmental groups that weren't about fashion, but just environmental groups in general. Because what we would do is, you know how they say a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down? People would come to these fun parties that we'd have, and then we would uh, tell them a few statistics about fashion waste, what was going on in the fashion industry, the social injustice that happens with women with garment workers who are mostly women. And these are things they had never heard before, and they think, oh my gosh. So it's such a community, and how you do it is such a great way to engage people who would typically not um, be in that space. And the thing is about some of these people, they do have the power, right? And I lived in Canberra when I started this. A lot of them work in public service, for example, right? It's great when you do things in your community, but sometimes it's helpful to think about people who may be in a different community or maybe have means of various kinds or power of varying kinds, how you can engage them, right? And we had this conversation earlier in our group when we were saying that a lot of people who come to clothes swaps and other things who benefit from that, they don't care about the climate. They're not coming to or repairing or mending their clothes because of the climate crisis. And, we decided in our group, but that's fine. That's okay. They're still doing it, right? Everyone comes into this space upside down, backwards, sideways, whatever. For me, it was from watching movies as a child, right? So the reason why I'm talking about this is because we're going to look at broader systems change and engaging wider audiences, because I'm going to say this with love, and I hold your hand as I say this, but we are in an echo chamber, right? We are in an echo chamber. On your social media, everything that you see, I bet you, everything that you see besides cat videos is environmental stuff. Everybody you follow, everybody that follows you. It can feel as if, oh, the movement is getting bigger, but in comparison to the wider population, it's not. It is, but very slowly, right? So, it is important sometimes to think about how you can engage people outside of your own friend group or community. And it's not always easy, but the more you do it, the more. So for me with closed swaps, it was wine, for example. What does that mean to you and what you do, what your group does? Okay, now the circular economy is based on 3 principles, and you all know this already. Eliminating waste and pollution, circulating products and materials at their highest value, regenerating nature, which is often ignored in Australia, and then all of this underpinned by a transition to renewable energy. Now, I work in the circular economy space, but I think it's limited and lacking. I love it, but I think it's a tool, not the goal. We often treat it like it's the solution to our environmental problems, but I think it's not. It's a good tool, but I don't, there's just too many things that it lacks for it to be seen as a holistic solution. So I'll go through them very quickly. So for example, the exclusion of human well-being is one of them. Now, this makes the circular economy less of an integrated system because humans are, guess what, part of the environment. And we discount ourselves or other people who are impacted by the climate crisis more than we are, who are impacted by waste. Waste colonization is another issue. Supply chain issues, the global South, the Pacific Islands, people who are really impacted. We don't always count that in, or sometimes we do it in a less, what's the word? In a really impactful way, right? So we need systems that really account for human needs, right? And EPR schemes need to be mandatory. Now, EPR schemes are another big part of the circular economy. We've seen with Seamless, Australia's circular fashion initiative, that in addition to other things, it's voluntary. And we know too well that companies, when they're given the opportunity to choose whether or not they'll do the right thing for the environment or human beings, what do? They don't, right? Sometimes they even greenwash. For example, Microsoft and Google last year reported on increased emissions compared to their targets that they had set, right, in 2024. And also companies like Shell, Unilever, FedEx, Air New Zealand, Nestle, they pushed back on and dropped some of their commitments, their environmental commitments, ESG commitments, right? Because it wasn't mandatory. Who's going to force them to do it? And now we have global leaders who are dropping major climate initiatives altogether. So that doesn't really feel inspiring in this space, right? Another issue with the circular economy is that, we don't have sufficient infrastructure capabilities to do what we say we're going to do. So in the world, we are extracting about 100 billion tons of materials globally, and only 7.2% of that is circled back into the global economy. And when it comes to textiles, it's only 1%. So we lack the infrastructure for a circular economy, not just in Australia, but globally. We lack capability. We need funding and research and development into, startups that are able to recycle, reuse, regenerate, right, at a level in which we need. And also, without uniform standards and certifications, one company is measuring based on reduction targets, and others measuring based on percentages. Another one is measuring outputs. Another one is measuring, impact on a different. There's just no uniform structure to know whether progress is actually happening. Everyone is saying we're doing this and we're doing that. It's fantastic, but how do we collectively know that progress is being made? It can feel that way, but in reality, the situation might be different. And then, the circular economy, how it talked about all of this needs to be underpinned by a transition to renewable energy. We're in a capitalist system. So even if we achieve 100% renewable energy, what are we going to use it for? Create more stuff with planned obsolescence and continue the cycle. So what is the point? Right? And then another issue with the circular economy is collaborating across sectors. So in reality, I don't think it's realistic to be able to reuse materials at their highest value, So the next best thing is to reuse at the probably second highest value, right? Whatever that would be. But that would mean different sectors. And so you would have to have cross-sector collaborations in order to do that in a realistic and productive and impactful way, and that's just not really happening right now. Even in other countries, that's just not really happening. So when some materials, post-consumer or post-use, another sector would take it up. It's just not, and that has to happen even at a design stage, right? It's happening in tiny buckets, but it's not anywhere near enough what we need. And those collaboration efforts also are not really being talked about. So that doesn't really, bring much hope for that either. Okay, so again, I'm going to say something that I'm going to hold your hand while I say it. This is not a circular economy issue. This is an Australia issue. And again, I say this with tremendous love and affection. But we have a problem here of culture cringe and tall poppy syndrome that's holding us back in the environmental space and in a business space and in other spaces. Now, culture cringe is an internalized inferiority complex that causes people in a country to dismiss their own culture as inferior to that of other countries. Now, we know intellectually in our minds, Australia is one of the best countries in the world. I'm biased. But we know that, for several reasons. There are other amazing countries too, but it's like we don't see ourselves, we don't value ourselves. And when it comes to the environmental circular economy space, there are so many startups that I have encountered that are doing phenomenal things that nobody in the world has created, has invented. I'm just blown away. And they don't get a lot of recognition from the government or anything or funding. They just they're struggling, left out in the cold to struggle on their own, right? We have chemical recyclers, textile recyclers like Blocktex. We have another one in WA called ThreadUp, right? And they can recycle clothes on a granular level. A genuine recycling, not reuse that we call recycling, not swapping that we call genuine recycling on a granular level, right? And then how I talked about the circular economy with regeneration of nature? It's a third pillar, but it's rarely ever talked about. There is a very small brand here in Australia called Mighty Good Bra. The founder of this small company has cracked the code for textile regeneration. She created the world's first fully compostable garment a few years ago. Now, we know how France is really aggressive with their laws, their environmental laws, right? Anytime France creates a new law, the world hears about it because they're the first. They're very bold. They're very, out there. And we love that. We emulate it, right? Where we can. If this person was a French woman, their government would have been, she would have had funding to the nine. She probably would have, had $1 billion valuation by now, right? Unfortunately, she does not, but the United Nations is working with her currently to create a global standard for compostable garments, right, for brands across the world, which is a plus. But this is an Australian brand, a small, very small, like, come on. And there's so many like that, but we just don't value that. So right here in Australia, we can create a fully circular system of textiles, right? With homegrown innovation, homegrown resources. We are one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Doesn't matter what the government tells us. Our GDP is about $2.8 trillion. Okay? We're one of the wealthiest countries in the world. We have all the resources we need to do that if we choose to. Okay, now this is the textile waste report from the Australia Institute that I co-authored last year. And we looked at some of the issues. I mean, the fashion industry is too big. We couldn't cover everything, but we did as much as we could. We looked at some of the issues around waste and how we could create a more circular system here in Australia. One thing we didn't talk about because it was just too much in this report is an ecological economy, right? And I believe strongly in not just a circular economy or just addressing climate change alone, but I believe in doing things holistically and seeking out ecological economies. And in ecological economy, you're looking at balancing human needs with the capacity the capacity of the Earth's biosphere and economic growth, right? So basically the interdependence of human economies with natural ecosystems, right? So you know how I was talking about the circular economy doesn't address human needs? The climate movement, I mean, it's a massive movement, but doesn't always, depending on how you look at it. So we need holistic systems that address human needs of, well-being, mental health, housing, um, yeah, universal basic services of things like transportation, food deserts, um, housing. I said housing, education, things like that should be part of holistic systems that we're creating, right? Because we have more than enough resources to do so. Now, in our report, we looked at multiple things. Like I mentioned, seamless was one of them. And, if anyone is familiar with the Australia Institute, they do not mince their words. They are fearless fighters when it comes to fighting for justice of any kind and fighting for the people. So we looked at seamless, which at the time had put out that a roadmap to having, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it might have been 65 to 70% of circularity by the year 2030, I think was one of their goals. And they ask brands to sign up and pay 4 cents levy per garment, which would be used for post-consumer, sorting, recycling, reusing, keeping it in circulation, right? And when we looked at it, we were like, that doesn't look right. We realized that you need at least 50-cent levy per garment because, first of all, you need to collect from post-consumption, right? Whether it's from your house, it's through your council. How's that going to happen? We're not going to rely on op shops. We need labor costs, right? Who's going to collect all that stuff? Who's going to sort it? We need warehousing facilities where things are sorted and kept, right? We need transportation, logistics, all of that stuff. And then, wherever it goes to, whether it goes to immediate reuse, like reselling, whether it goes to closed swaps, whether it goes to op shops, whether it goes to for recycling, all of that distribution is a lot. So there at the time there didn't seem to be a very clear plan for what they said they were going to do. Moreover, it needed at least 50 cents per garment to make that happen, probably even more, right? So these are some of the things that we addressed in our report. We also talked about imposing a tax on ultra-fast fashion. Now, we're all familiar with Temu and Shein, or Shein and Temu, as I like to call them, Shimu, affectionately. I've seen ads with like $2.50 for a coat. Right. We've seen all that ad. And this is just ridiculous, artificially low prices. And France, they've done it this year where they've put a tax on ultra fast fashion. So we recommend that the Australian government do the same. Now, this is a nod to degrowth. Now, in the report, I did not want to, I specifically did not write the word degrowth because, degrowth is a huge school of thought, massive discourse with a lot of, and I didn't want to open that can of worms, right? We're just in baby steps with circular economy in Australia, and then you bring in that, there's a lot. So, but what I did was I brought in the principle, degrowth, how it talks about drastically scaling down resource use. So we thought taxing fast fashion is a nod to degrowth in my mind. That's how I saw it, in terms of a way to drastically reduce consumption, right? Banning fast fashion advertising is really important because a lot of it, through influencers, especially particularly TikTok, Shein hauls and all of that stuff, that's how this stuff gets around. Now, these companies, we recognize that these companies, they're multi-billion-dollar companies. I think Shein is worth about $64 billion. Temu, something similar. We know that they're agile, they can get around this, but this is also about protecting Australian fashion brands as well, right? And making it more difficult for them. Banning export of textile waste within 5 years was another one of our recommendations because we have all seen documentaries and you go on Greenpeace Africa, all these people in the global south where, our clothes are literally polluting their soil, water, and air, right? And in this country, I think textile waste exporters, I could be wrong, but make up somewhere in the ballpark of $50 million annually from exporting. And so there's this lie that's always being told. See, this is why the industry is called waste colonization. There's this lie that's always being told to this day that, oh, they need the clothes. that they do not need the clothes. They want the clothes and all of that. One, it's plastic, so a lot of it is plastic, so it's carrying toxic chemicals. We know fast fashion sometimes can have um, toxic chemicals and dyes and things. And they just don't need the clothes. A lot of the clothes are culturally inappropriate. You talk about Kenya, some of these are Muslim countries or have, different religious backgrounds or cultural background. And, what are you doing sending them mini skirts and crop tops and stuff like that? That's instant waste, right? So a lot of this is polluting those countries. And, you know, it baffles me that to this day, there are people in this country or in Europe or the UK who say, oh, no, we're helping them in 2025. And just like how fast fashion is ruining our textiles industry here in Australia, secondhand fast fashion is ruining the economies of those countries as well, right? It's not allowing their own textiles industries to develop, right? And we say that we care about that. If we continue doing that, it's blatant that we don't care about people in the global south. And let's just, if we don't, that's fine. Let's just call a spade a spade. We don't care. Let's just say we don't care rather than pretending to say we're helping them. It's highly profitable. That's why people are doing it, right? And you know, I've been on panels where people are saying, oh, this is a good thing that we're doing, and people were accepting of that. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, in spite of all the documentaries that have been filmed in these countries. So that's something that's really important to address as well. Moving on, government-funded discounts for people who get clothes repaired. So this could be through right to repair, discount schemes, rebates, and so on. France, I think, their government put back, was it about 150 million euros a couple of years ago for people to have discount schemes for repairing their things. We can also do the same. Not that I believe we should do everything that France does. We're perfectly capable of coming up with our own laws. And I think we should do that as well. Now, the federal government needs to invest heavily to develop an Australian circular textiles industry. And we had in our group this conversation earlier, we have people who work in councils, how hard it is to get money for their programs and initiatives. And we know how hard it is to get grants, to do your research, and to do your programs. I run clothes swaps. People, it's hard. People don't want to pay for the skills and time and effort it takes. We have to collectively, I think, like 5, 10 years ago, it was almost nearly impossible, right, to get funding to do even some of the things that we've done now. But now as the movement is growing and understanding and research has been done on these impacts, more funding has been released, but it's not anywhere near enough. So I think we have to push back collectively really hard on federal governments, funding bodies, whether they're private, corporate, that we've amassed trillions of dollars in damaging the environment. We can't chuck a few coins at a few initiatives and say, oh, you've done something. It's going to take huge investments. And this is the mindset we have to put into minds. We can't just be accepting of, I know it's hard, beggars have no choosers, whatever, but somehow we have to get it out to people in these spaces that this is going to cost huge investments over long periods of time, right? Greater support for community op-shops and recycling initiatives. This is so that they do not have to send their rags overseas to make profits. Again, we're one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and it's great that these charities and op-shops have these initiatives, but it shouldn't be up to them alone to feed the homeless or support women in vulnerable situations, right? So policies that are akin to the New York State Fashion and Social Accountability Act. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So they had some really good proposed act that hasn't been passed yet, where companies who make $100 million and upwards and sell clothes in New York had to have compulsory reporting, compulsory emissions targets, reuse targets, and so on and so forth. So that was really crucial. Tax incentives for businesses that purchase materials made from textile waste recycled in Australia, and procurement policies for circular products. Who remembers Red Cycle? All right. Remember why Red Cycle failed? I do not blame Red Cycle. I blame us. Why? Because I remember when I first came across Red Cycle, I believe it was the second season of War on Waste. And I was just like, are we really expecting, is it 5 million plastic bags we use in a week in this country? Are we really, I could be wrong with that figure, but are we really expecting this small business to handle all of our 26 million soft plastics, this little small business? So when it collapsed, I didn't even, without even knowing why, learning why, I was like, of course it was going to collapse. I knew something was going to go wrong from the get-go. First of all, climate crisis, hello, fossil fuels, plastic. Why are we not looking at reducing the plastic in the first place? Why were we like, oh, this is what I mean by we celebrate baby steps that are barely a drop in the ocean instead of looking at the bigger picture in this country. That situation should have been, we'd have been like, okay, we have a company that can recycle soft plastics into playground equipment, whatever it was they were making. The demand, it was clear there wouldn't be enough demand for that products, but never mind. In the meantime, we should have been looking at how, and still now should be looking at how we can drastically reduce using soft plastics, right? Maybe bioplastics, but reusable bioplastic, because systems where, you take to the supermarket, you get back, it doesn't go out of that system. I don't know what it is, but, there's different models around the world that we can adopt, right? So that was such a big thing. And it didn't make sense to me. Anyway, so procurement policies for circular products. Now, this could be in textiles. It could be in other things as well. It's really important. I've spoken to a lot of brands who say that would really, circular brands, sorry, who say that would really help them. So tax incentives now for businesses that use recycled materials. So, for example, if you used recycled fabric, textiles in your products, you should get a tax incentive. If another business buys from you to make their products, or you sell that, another business buys, they should get a tax incentive as well, right? It helps businesses and helps the circular economy move forward. Subsidize the cost of textile repairs for consumers. We talked about that already. Eco-labeling and eco-modulation. Now, those are the things from the report. Now, these are just a few others that I added in there that I think would go the whole mile, which is education and apprenticeships for skills in sourcing, garment technology, and circular design. So university education, any form of education, we need that, right? I think currently RMIT is doing a circular course in collaboration with Seamless. That's the only one I know about. There might be more, but that's still not enough, right? Public awareness campaigns. Somebody brought this up earlier about scaring people. And it doesn't have to be scary. But who remembers the Slip Slop Slap campaign? Babies are born knowing about Slip Slop Slap, right? In the US, somebody talked about the cigarettes as well, right? So what if we had campaigns to encourage people to buy Australian and to buy circular, sustainable Australian, right? Just it's not hard, Monitoring and reporting using existing metrics. Now, this is a bugbear in the fashion industry. There's not a lot of data on with brands and how much polyester they're using, so on and so forth. So whatever metrics exist in currently. So for example, you might not really be aware of this unless if you have a brand or you worked in retail, but sometimes, the little tag will have like a tiny little SKU number. That's for like when the barcode scans, they know the type of material. It's not something you as a customer would do. But those are metrics that they can start with to try and record information about the clothes that they buy and sell and have. Zero discharge of hazardous chemicals is an initiative that is aimed at preventing toxic chemicals in the fashion industry. So that could be another metric to ensure, if in Australia we're developing our own textiles industry, to ensure that it's as clean as possible. So how we talked about regeneration that Stephanie Devine created? What's beautiful about her formula, what she does is she makes clothes that can generate back into food systems. That's how clean it is, right? So we want to keep the toxic, chemical, nasty stuff out of our fashion industry, and that's zero discharge is a good standard to do that, potentially. Okay, so all this to say that, again, the circular economy is a tool, not the goal. We want to look at ecological economies, incorporating ecological economies in our solutions as much as possible. So I think sometimes when we're forming ideas and solutions, particularly to take them forward, as policy or legislation, we can borrow ideas from, post-growth, degrowth, steady state economists, donut economics, sorry, donut economics, well-being. I misspelled well-being, so I'm just going to change that. You did not see that. Didn't happen. Well-being, sharing economy, stuff that we already do. But, in terms of moving forward, like talk about like seeking, universal basic services and things like that. Ideas like, for example, privatizing public services. I know that sounds crazy, right? But it's possible if we push for it, right? But that's something that you can achieve in an ecological economy. And the truth is that it's going to be hard, but we just have to be bold because guess what? According to some scientists tell us we're facing the sixth mass extinction. So are we going to wait for something to happen before we start saying, okay, we need to do something? I feel like the pandemic was a warning. It wasn't about the environment, but it showed us how things can change overnight. But guess what? Wasn't it interesting how things change overnight and these large corporations who always say it's impossible or it's going to take a year or 5 year strategy, they all change like that? Wasn't that interesting? So when large corporations tell us, oh, it's going to take time and they give us, just know that it can't be true because more than anyone else, they have the resources. They have the resources to make anything happen. They're like Santa Claus, right? There should be. They have the resources to make anything happen overnight. So let's not buy that anymore. Let's say we can even help them out by saying, right, looking at their financial reports and say, okay, yeah, so you actually made how many billion last year? What if you took just 2 billion? You made like 60 billion. What if just two of those billions and put some in here and did this? Create a strategy for them and tell them that, they should thank you because you fixed it for them, right? Okay, now tiers of holistic change. Holistic change happens from my experience. Now, this is why, earlier when I was sharing my story, work as a stylist, when I work with individuals, work with clothes swaps, I work with groups and work in systems changes because it keeps me in the know about what needs to be done. I love doing the clothes swaps because I get to work with communities and see that change and see the issues that are happening. But change has to be multifaceted, right? So it's great that individuals, we're all taking accountability to make shifts in our personal lives. And I feel like there's an overemphasis on individual action when I look through my feed on social media. So with a lot of these not-for-profit environmental groups, it's very much how you can recycle your plastic or what to avoid when you go shopping. That's great. That's important. But I feel like if you are one of these, and I'm not going to name any names, but, these organizations that, have funding and have such power and huge following, you can direct some of your following towards advocacy, towards greater systems change more often, right? All the individual stuff is cute, but at this stage, it's barely a drop in the ocean, right? Community action, we've spoken about that a lot today. But the thing I want to add about community action is that sometimes we feel powerless and sometimes we don't feel included in some spaces, but we want to have an impact because we care about these issues. So what it means is just create your own table. If you're not invited to a table, create your own table. Right? That's what I did. The weirdo that I am, I just started posting secondhand clothes online. Didn't think anybody would care, and it just started, and then randomly people said, I love your outfits. I'm like, really? And I was just doing it for myself. I was actually scared of, I used to be very shy, believe it or not. But I was, I just started doing it for myself because I thought, I just wanted to share post what I was doing. So create your own table. And this grew and grew and grew, right? Into the work that I do now. So just create your own table. It doesn't matter if you're sitting alone at your table, nobody's engaging with you. Trust me, just keep going because somebody somewhere is always watching and it'll reach a time where what the value that you bring will be sought after. Unfortunately, something will happen. Okay, let me give you an example. Zoom. Zoom has been around for a long time, right? Some of us knew of Zoom, some of us had never heard of it. Then a pandemic came. What happened? Blew up, right? So this is what I mean by sometimes you're just doing the thing that is important to you and it will come a time that it's needed, right? There are people that are looking for you somewhere else, right? Your leadership. Um, Another thing I do is, I mentioned this before, go outside of our comfort zones, try and reach people outside of the feed, outside of the spaces that we're comfortable in. Figure out a way, because we need all hands on deck, right? We need what everybody can bring to change the status quo, because we do not have time the way we think we have time, right? What if an alien invasion happened? I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I just wanted to see if you're still awake after lunch. Um, um, unless you're a Star Trek person like me. Anybody? Star Trek? Okay, no. Yes, yes. Okay. Um, so I'll share a story with you. I lived in Melbourne at the time of the great pandemic, 2020. I moved to Sydney in 2021 around May, June. I ran away because I just couldn't take it anymore. And as soon as I found my things were still in Melbourne. As soon as I found a place to live, I had hired a removalist to bring my things over from Melbourne. As soon as I found a place to live, Sydney went into lockdown. So it's like they couldn't cross the border. It was just a weird time. Remember, they couldn't cross the border. I had like only 2 or 3 pairs of clothes. I had not even a spoon, nothing. I just had this place and it was empty, nothing. And I needed things to cook with, but it was weird because you didn't know whether you could go out or not. It was safe. It was just and I didn't really know people. It was horrible. And I remember thinking, okay, if I can just get one pot, like a one wok or something, right? Just so at least I can cook, until my things arrive. I remember thinking this, but I was like, I'm not sure if I should go out and all that. And then my next door neighbor, I kid you not, put a wok outside. I still have it to this day. It wasn't just a wok. He put out other things too that he was getting. You know how people just put stuff outside. But a wok was there, and I still use it to this day. It was like like he heard my thoughts. So if I hadn't gotten that wok, what would have happened? It probably would have rained on it, and it probably would have ended up in landfill. Now, how much stuff gets put out that someone next door in that neighborhood needs, or someone in the next street needs, right? In this country, we're discarding 76 million tons of stuff every year. And how much of that is reusable, right? So things like swapping, it's just a basic, simple way that imagine like all neighborhoods. It was a common thing in all neighborhoods and councils and schools. Kids, we talked earlier, I think it was Nick who talked about parents buying fast fashion all the time because kids grow out of clothes so quickly. You just go to Big W, Kmart, whatever. What if schools had rooms where, as the kids grow, parents just swap out the clothes like a library? What if councils had rooms, because they have so many spaces where, and universities too, you're not off the hook, where, you buy the racks and the mirrors and the hangers. They just remain there in the room. People just sign up and come and use it and swap. So they don't have to buy the things. They don't have to, you just have the list of you just have the guidelines, and they come and different groups sign up to swap every week, right? So it's not really that hard. And my vision, my goal, my dream has always been to make swapping part of everyday mainstream culture in Australia. It doesn't have to be an event. My friend Tema has some of the best swaps ever at her place. It doesn't have to be an official event. It could just be, you're having a barbecue or a movie night or a girls' night or a guys' night, and you just have a rack or a table in the background. As people arrive, they can, deposit their swap items, go have dinner, whatever it is they're doing. As you're leaving, just pick up a few items that you don't have to buy. I always have too many candles. I don't know why. I just do, right? So, someone might need my candles and I might need a hairbrush. And it saves you having to buy that stuff, saves stuff from going to landfill. So that's something that could easily be incorporated into our daily lives seamlessly, right? And the thing about community, I want to say, is advocacy is really crucial. Sorry, this was meant to go up. This was clothes swapping is a more fun and sustainable way to get a fashion fix. Yes, that is true. So this was War on Waste season 3. I remember seeing War on Waste in 2017, the first season, and I was relatively new to this country. I'm like, I'm going to be on that show. and I was in season 3. And that was with the goal of wanting to make swapping part of everyday culture in Australia. I thought if I get on that show, I can show people how amazing and fun clothes swaps are, right? But the thing I wanted to say about community as well, this is one of the swaps that we held. The thing I wanted to say of swapping is, I'm sorry, community action. It's not just swapping, it's repairing, mending, anything that you do in a community is that we want to look towards broader systems change, right? We're doing stuff in our communities, great, but we want to harness that energy and harness the challenges and the issues into policy that we can take to our local and federal representatives, local and federal government for systems change, right? One of the discussions we had were people in council, how they struggle to get funding to do all the things they want to do. That's, a waste officer struggling in Penrith, that was Carla, Penrith, but, in every council, there is a waste officer, environmental officer struggling to get funding. What if, we collectively, as we're having these, we need to push for what would change the status quo? What are the biggest policies or laws, challenges that we have as a group, whether you're an amending group, whatever you are, that would make the biggest difference? Is it funding? Is it support? Is it networking? What is it? Is it mentoring? Business support mentoring? What is it? So even if it's a list of 5 hostage demands, um, just try and collate that, because I guarantee you, if you're feeling that, there are other groups, in a different state, in a different council that are also feeling the same thing, right? So we need to collectively advocate for systems change, broader systems change, using some of those ecological economy concepts that I spoke about. Now, just more. Sure, sure. We're getting there. Almost done. Okay, almost done. Okay, so these are just more fun clothes swap photos. The thing about clothes swaps are that um, people have such a great time. They come as individuals, leave as friends. The storytelling is epic. So you'll see someone bring a dress that belonged to her mother or her grandmother, wedding dress, and she'll see another woman wear it across the room, and she'll saunter to her and start telling her, sharing the story of how it was her mother's wedding dress. And then the story of that dress lives on. And then they always become friends, right? And so when that person who received that dress, it's funny because I get, they always share these stories with me. When every time says, oh, your dress is beautiful. And then she shares a story of how, oh, I went to a clothes swap and it belonged to this woman and her mother and so on and so on and so on. Right. So there, that value, that community value, that connection is so powerful. When I launched Swap in this city in May, there's something that someone said to me, because she'd only been to 2 clothes swaps. That was her second clothes swap. And she said something to me that really just, yeah. She said now this is a woman, she's an executive. She's high up in upper echelons of society. She's like, I never get to go to events like this. Now this is someone who gets invited to all sorts of cocktail and luxury and all that. And I was like, you? Like, what do you mean? She's like, no, like just how women were all like just excited and just having fun and just letting our hair down. And we're all like little girls. And we had women from their 20s to their 60s squealing like little girls at a slumber party, just excited with clothes. And that's just not something that happens very often. So it's just a very, very different energy that you don't get anymore because we live in a very isolated world, right? And we're all in our headphones, we're all in our heads and things like that. So there's just so many benefits to community actions in addition to swapping that have greater impact, that's potentially so valuable that it's immeasurable. How's that for concept? Now, let's get down to brass tacks, because we need funding for a lot of things. That's just the sad truth of the capitalist system we live in. Now, these are just a few potential funding opportunities, whether for businesses, some for initiatives. You'd have to look deeper into them. There's more for sure. Recycling Modernization Fund, that's about $200 million. That one is for sorting, processing, and remanufacturing things like tires, paper, cardboard, glass, and plastic. Not textiles, but guess what? about 65% of clothes are made of plastic. So by default, textiles should be in that, right? And these are things we can do. We can demand that, they add textiles to funds like this one. National Productivity Fund, that's $900 million. That's for delivering broader initiatives like right to repair, reforms, business opportunities, and things like that. Advanced manufacturing, that's $1.6 billion. That's to enable the development of more complex domestic manufacturing. And then we have the future made in Australia, which is the big kahuna at $22.7 billion. And that's for over a 10-year period, enabling the private sector to invest over that period of time in industry. Now, we're not limited to these. Like I said, there are probably others, local, federal ones, state ones. But we can altogether demand a new heavily funded circular and ecological textiles initiative, right? We can ask the government however much we want to ask for. Remember that we're rich, okay? We are very freaking rich, okay? We're worth like $2.8 trillion. Okay, so how much do you want to ask for? 5 billion? 20 billion? What do we want? Let's ask for it, right? And say, for a circular and ecological textiles industry, it's really, really critical that we do that. Now, another reason why it's absolutely critical is that in the early 90s, we had treasurer was Keating. And the neoliberal policies of that time, 30 plus years, is impacting us now. We have fashion businesses that are closing down. The last few years, so many clothing businesses have closed down. From the legacy ones like Dion Lee to smaller ones that you haven't heard of. I know so many people have lost their businesses, right? So we have to act now because whatever we do now is going to impact the next 10, 20, 30 years. If you have children, it's going to, not just with fashion businesses, but everything, the environment. It's going to have a knock-on effect. So we have to act now. We have to be bold. We have to not be afraid of asking for too much, what they see as too much, which is not too much, considering we might be extinct. No, I'm just kidding. It's not too much, right? We have to be bold in just demanding what we want. You know how they say, reach for the stars, land on a cloud? We won't get everything, but we'll get more, right? If we ask for more. If you ask for very little, you might not get anything, or you might get even smaller, right? So let's be bold. Let's embrace no more culture cringe, no more tall poppy. Let's be accepting of ourselves, and let's go for it, because we don't have any choice. At least we can say we tried, even if nothing happens. Now, in terms of funding, there was just something else I wanted to mention that emphasizes how rich we are. So the Australian Council of Trade Unions has called for, this is an example, has called for the government to put a 25% tax on revenue from gas exports because they don't pay taxes, right? And this would raise $12.5 billion. Do you know what $12.5 billion can do? It could eliminate HEX debts. It could add about 75, it could increase childcare subsidies by 75%, right? It could even triple what the government is spending on the housing crisis right now. All right. So again, their money is there. Do not be afraid to ask. Do not be afraid to say, this is what we want, and get as many people on your side as possible. So this is a QR code for the textile waste report that we published in May 2024 at the Australia Institute. It's very easy. You can also just Google textile waste in Australia. It'll come up. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share the links. Now, this is a free clothes swapping kit that I made, free downloadable kit on how. So all my 15 years of hosting clothes swaps collated into this little square. It's like a chip. You just put it in your brain. And okay, so this is a funny story. Yesterday afternoon, it was a very busy day for both Alison and I. I was on the other side of town. I was in the CBD in my office, and she was here. And we're both incredibly busy and frantic. We just spoke for a bit. But I was like, while we were talking, I was like, what if we had like a petition, for the government? I said asking for too much. You'll see what I meant now in a second. A petition for a circular textiles industry and also the development of textiles industry here in Australia. What if we did that? So I didn't get around to it till like 11 p.m. last night. Believe it or not, we were emailing. So if you see some typos or whatever, just it's fine. Just give us grace. We'll fix it later. But yeah, so this is it. And basically a lot of it is the stuff that sorry, is anybody okay? Is the stuff that I mentioned. Some of it is from the textile waste report. Some of it is from the slide that I had that talks about a fully circular system as well. Right. So it's a long list of hostage demands, but I think we're worth it, and we deserve it in this country. And I think Australia has the capability to be the world's first fully circular textiles industry on the planet. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nina, for this incredibly inspiring, thought-provoking keynote. We've got questions. We've got some coming in online. And if there's any in the room, please raise your hand. I'll come around with the mic. We are a little over time. Shall we quickly do the online questions? There's not too many, Badra.
Thanks. There is one question from Cassandra. What kinds of fabrics are best for designers to use with longevity or recycling in mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to say cotton, but provided it's recycled cotton, because cotton is a very thirsty plant, right? Some will say it's recycled polyester, but plastic again is another issue. But then there's the problem of we have so much of it. What do we do with it, right? And then there's a lot of new types of garments being manufactured, mycelium. There's one called bark cloth that's from Uganda as well. Incredibly sustainable. I would go with that bark cloth. Look it up. Yeah.
Is there a question in the room? Is there another one you'd like to?
No, just some lovely, kind comments online. Ruth, and can you put that back? Ruth and Yango says, I love that what Nina has said, that swapping doesn't have to be an event on its own, but it can be incorporated into other events. Here in Kenya, Malindi, we've embraced this approach by integrating swaps into all our events, from picnics and painting sessions to salsa nights and jazz evenings.
It's beautiful. I love it.
Someone else says, now I want to organise a clothes swap. So a lot of really positive comments.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go to that guide that the QR code on the guide. We could put those in the chat too, for those that would like to organise their own.
For sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
There is a question from Jackie.
It's probably a different question. Not trying to hijack about the textile. One question I have is always about the lower value items in the reuse industry, because like when we deal with toys, when we talk to some expert, one of the problem we face is they talk about the reuse value or even recycle value, because not textile, I think it's unfortunate but fortunate at the same time, because it's relatively easy to recycle. But then, so how can we all do as a community together on other difficult to recycle items?
Yeah, toys are probably one of the hardest to recycle, because you have so many different types of materials in one product. I think that's one of the ones where we have to drastically reduce. Kids don't need as many toys as we buy them. They don't. That's the issue right there. It's not recycling. Is that we're buying too many toys. That kids get bored. What's that statistic? A child will play for a toy. It takes about 11 minutes for a child to get bored. What's that?
Less than an hour.
Less than an hour. Like, come on. And also, we're not teaching kids good values by buying them so much stuff. You're teaching them overconsumption. So the issue is that yes, if I were in the reusable toy space, I would be campaigning for toys that can be recycled, just like textiles, how we're campaigning for circular design and recyclable, reusable materials in our clothing. I think that's something that the pre-loved or secondhand toy industry can do. And also encourage parents to buy less stuff. It's just so, and then swap. What you're doing is great. Swap instead of buy, you know. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Education. We need to, as while they're still young, there's still hope to decouple their little minds from from extreme use, extreme waste. Yeah.
We might use this opportunity to thank Nina again for the amazing.
Thanks so much for having me.
So rich, insights. The idea now was to just have a little bit of a wrap up of the day and I guess follow a few threads to call on
Sorry, can I say, sorry, I'm just going to say one more thing. This petition will be incredibly grateful if you can sign it and then share it with your networks, because we want to call for an inquiry, a parliamentary inquiry for a circular textiles industry, but also support for the Australian textiles industry. Oh, ooh, see, there you go. That's what happens when you do something at 11 p.m. We'll do that. We'll send it out. I think, yeah. Sorry.
We could email and follow it up, and maybe we'll put the QR code on the Padlet too, which I'll just share, on the next screen. So just it's been such an amazing day, and I think we've really shared so many stories and experiences of working with community to enable change, fairly significant change, and we just thought it would be an opportunity to try and round up a few of these thoughts, and invite you as well to continue to talk with us on the Padlet. If you have any opportunities that you would like to offer, either Tema mentioned a network, Delight, Distract, Disrupt, which already has momentum. I think a lot of you would find it really interesting. A network, it's a movement thinking about delightful change that we can make. And there's so many other great stories and experiences we've had today. So if you want to continue working together, we really invite you to that Padlet. Fantastic. That's a great idea. There was a lot of talk today about how we might capture and measure, social impact and the value of what we do and the relationships that we build. And I think this, we a lot of us are feeling the need to be able to, translate the relationships and show, the value of the relationships that we're building and making, and ways of mobilizing and scaling out, collaboration. And I think that's what this event has been all about, as well as working with bottom-up change and all levels of change, holistic change that Nina talks so well about. But I just thought I would share this little research activity that goes with the swaps that Jenna has been organising. And then we also rolled it out at the campus swap as well, which we held our first swap at Western Sydney University, where people are sharing stories or experiences of the connections, the swing tag, writing on a swing tag, a small story of the value of being involved in a swap. It might be the connection they've made, the reciprocity, and I think it goes to the point that Nina has made in conversation a lot about what exchange can be, and it can be a gateway to learning about other kinds of sustainable practices. So yeah, this example from our campus swap about work attire, and how someone hopefully would feel confident and powerful in that work dress moving forward. And then, an example of the reciprocity where somebody actually needed professional clothes for working in schools and then found, the work dress that had been gifted to the swap. So I really like that, that connection and exchange, just piecing those together. And then this example of dishwashing liquid will wash out any tough stains. I sat on some, waterproof slime and have tried everything but dishwashing liquid. So, the swap became an opening to exchange stories about laundry and cheating a wash and ways to get care of our clothing included. So this swing tag activity was here today as well, so people can talk about both the act of giving to the swap, but also what that item might then, it's forevers, it's new beginnings with you, and what that could open up. So I think it's part of the communication of the value of the activities and community-led initiatives that we heard about so much today. I think that's the last one, yes. And some other next steps, as well as the Padlet. Did we put yes, there's the Padlet QR code for us to continue working together and connecting and the momentum of this event. And thank you so much to the library for working with us on this event. It's just been really fantastic. There's a lot of change going on in the university sector at the moment, but it's been an absolute delight to work with the library team on this and co-host it, and also the Festival of Action. Great name, isn't it? That happens on campus, and the Institute for Culture and Society Urban Futures in supporting this event.